Hello everybody, and welcome to this conversation at the WE Support Panel series, where we are going to today talk about scaling, getting past the first hurdle. Now, lots and lots of businesses over the years would love to scale. Some succeed and some don't. And today we're going to determine the differences in between the two. Now, I have really thought about this topic, and I've also, of course, had to act upon this topic as well. And there's 3 points that I would pose to you before I introduce you to both of our guest speakers who are going to enlighten us with their ideas on the theme later on. The first one is scale. What is a scalable business? Well, in many ways, what a scalable business is a business, yes, that has a scalable business model. And if you want to think about, well, I wonder, is my business scalable? Ask yourself this question. Let's just say, wonderfully, magically, the amount of sales that you do doubles overnight. The question is, could your business handle it? And if not, why not? And that is the answer to the question, is those are the elements that will lead to whether your business is scalable or not. Let's just say you are running a business where there's just you selling your time. If you were to double the amount of sales that you had overnight, could you double yourself quickly? Well, maybe not. On the other hand, in the long term, maybe you could bring others in to deliver your service. Now, in contrast to that, if you look at the really big software companies, if they double their sales overnight, then all they have to do is double their server space, or they need to do other things like that. But the point I'm making to you is that question can really reveal A, if your business is scalable, B, what you need to do to make it scalable, and number 3 is what could prevent it being scalable. So that's where I wanted to start off our conversation today, is that sense of scaling. What exactly does it mean at a very practical level? And then, of course, the second point is getting past the first hurdle. Well, let's just think about, what are hurdles? What are they, really? Sometimes they can be really good learning opportunities dressed up in problems. And as somebody that is over 10 years in business, believe me, I have made plenty of those. And I always look failure or challenge or hurdle straight in the eye, and the key thing I wonder all the time is, what is this teaching me? What can I learn about this? And that often de-emotionalizes hurdles. Rather than think about, why can't I get over this, or what's wrong with me? Why don't I know how to do this? That often takes away that sense of emotion, brings it right back to logic. And then the third part of the statement that is leading our conversation today is getting past the first hurdle. How do we get past them? Well, first of all, what we need to do is we need to define the hurdle. We need to understand exactly what it is. We need to understand its parameters. And then what I think can be very useful after that is to understand, what resources have I got in order to move forward. Personally, I use a very useful tool to help me with this process. It's called GROW. G is for goal. So what exactly am I trying to achieve? Because often when we face a hurdle, we think about the problem. Whereas instead, when you think about the goal that you might want to achieve instead, it can often put a very positive spin on it. So for example, one of the things that I had wanted to do within our business was to bring new money into the business with a view to achieving a product, or the development of a product that could overcome a problem, and thus that I felt we could bring it into the market. The thing is, I was focusing on the wrong thing, is that I was saying, where am I going to find the money? The money is the problem. Whereas instead, the goal was to create this product and bring it to market. So instead, what I did was I looked around for ways in which we could do this that would be aligned with the business. The way that we ended up doing it was through an innovation partnership with a university here in Ireland. So in essence, what we did was that we focused on G, the goal, rather than the problem. And then I went on and I thought about R, what are the realities? And when you really document realities, let me tell you what happens. The key thing is that realities repeat themselves. So it feels like that there's 10 barriers standing in your way, whereas in essence, often what happens are 3. They just dress themselves up in a different way. So document the R for realities, and then separate them into, what can I do something about and what can I not? I can make a phone call. I can reach out and talk to somebody. I can apply for something. I cannot change people's opinions. I cannot change macroeconomic policy with one voice. There's lots of things that I cannot do. But if I put my energy into what I can do, that can be very helpful. Then I move on to O. O is for opportunities. And that is that lovely time that you can just document all of the things that you could do to make a difference to achieve that goal. And then W is where the magic happens. W is, what am I going to do about it? So I'm going to leave you with that concept now. And on that note, let's now go and hear from two fantastic women who have great stories to tell and a lot of insights to share. Their names are Ruth Bailey, and she is from VIGO Health, as well as Karina Turley, and she is from Capella. Let's first of all start with Ruth. Ruth, will you tell us a little bit about you and your story, please?
Hi everybody, my name is Ruth Bailey and I am the Chief Executive of VIGO Health. So first of all, I just want to introduce a little bit more about who I am and my background. I have been involved, I'm on my 4th startup now, and I have gone from small to big, and I'm back to small again. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my journey and how that all worked. VIGO Health, just to introduce VIGO Health, first of all, for a few minutes, we are a new health and wellbeing startup, and we provide private health cover and private health care for everyday health needs. So if you think health insurance is typically about hospitals, our proposition is all about the everyday. Very briefly, our investor is Irish Life, financial service provider Irish Life, which we're delighted to partner with. We're regulated by the central bank, so huge relationships with stakeholders and our regulators and investors. And we provide our services combination of underwriting by Irish Life Health, and we provide our digital health services ourselves. So really, I suppose I wanted to start on my journey, and even though I've been involved in 4 startups, I am going to talk to you in a bit more detail about the VIGO Health journey, mostly because it's where I'm at right now, but also I want to kind of, I suppose, explain how I came here and how I came about here and some of the hurdles that I met along the way and what I learned about it. So the initial seed idea came from myself and my co-founder met for a coffee in September of 2019. We started having a chat and said, look, have we got something here? Is there a problem, a customer problem that is currently needs a solution for it? So we gave ourselves 6 months and we said, let's try and develop a proof of concept. Let's write our business plan and start seeing if we've got something there. So fast forward 6 months later, we had done rounds and rounds of research. We had proven our concept and our proposition, and we started talking to an institutional investor who were interested in what we were doing. So everything was going absolutely great. We kept going. We put in our application to the central bank for a regulatory license, and I had just completed an RFP process to appoint our platform developer, which is a significant supplier for us to basically build our digital product. And then COVID hit. And we were sitting there with, our investment, starting to move away from us, not having the funding to actually go ahead and build our platform, and having a really super business plan, but everything was on paper. So what did we do? And most people at that stage probably would have said, you know what, we need to shelve this and go back to the day job. But it was either complete stubbornness, or I like to call it resilience, that we decided, and we made a decision there and then and said, no, we're going to keep going. We strongly believed and felt so strongly that we had a solution and a proposition that was really, really strong for the market and that answered a customer need. And we said we had to keep going. So we pivoted and pivoted quickly. We had to change our business plan. We had to change our financial projections. We had to change our model, and we had to find a way of keeping going, but with different funding options. So we kept going and we changed our business model. Instead of using big dev shops and web development agencies, we found some freelance coders to work with us. And we changed our financial projections and started talking to some VC funders or VC investors. At the same time, the world was starting to kind of calm down a bit. People were a little bit less jittery around what was happening in the COVID situation, and our institutional investors came back around and we picked up the conversation again. And we kept progressing with that, and we ultimately did a deal with Irish Life, our institutional investor. The reason why I tell that story is, first of all, for 2 reasons. One, to show that it's never a linear path to get to where you think you need to go to. And for all of the planning and the assumptions that you will make, you're probably going to be wrong, or some things won't turn out the way you expect. And you can either pivot and keep going and make a decision quickly, or you can give up. In this example, we decided, and everything was going against us, and we decided to keep going. And glad to say that on 31st of May in 2021, we launched, and we've had a super success to our business so far. So that really the whole point of that story is to show and to illustrate, you've got to be able to keep going no matter what things turn at you. So I suppose just to recap a little bit about what I've learned along the way and the journey that I've been on, is the first thing is, no matter what you think, no matter what assumptions you've made, no matter what you've put into your business plan, you'll be wrong, right? Because assumptions by their nature are, a form of projection into the future, and nobody knows what the future is going to look like. So my advice would be, launch with an MVP, learn, iterate, and keep rebuilding, because you're never going to get all the answers completely right. And if you wait till everything's perfect, you'll never do it. So that's the first thing I've learned along the way. The second thing I've learned is you can never do enough research. And when I say research, I mean talking to customers or prospective customers. And it doesn't have to be really expensive research. You can go and try and find some customers in your own network or potential prospective customers in your own network. There are some really, really cost-effective ways of doing research through SurveyMonkey and through loads of different tools. So you can never, ever, ever test enough your proposition and how your customers are going to behave. What I'd also say, what I've learned along the way is that, if life gives you lemons, you've got to make lemonade, right? So no matter what's thrown at you, there's always another way and there's always another avenue. And you just have to think a little bit laterally about keeping going and trying to keep going. And finally, I'd say there's never the right time. There's never a good time. I have been involved in 4 startups, as I said, and none of them really were exactly on the right time. But, sometimes you just have to do it and go for it and give it your best. So in summary, I'd say I'm a big fan of startups, as Susan's already introduced. I love startups. They're not for everybody. I love them. And if you love them and if you love what you do and if you're really passionate about your business idea, just go for it. There's never a wrong time.
Well, Ruth, that was an introduction and a half and lots of enthusiasm there. As she said, there is never a wrong time to start. Now, 3 things that I picked out of that. Number 1 was at the very start of her story is that Ruth pointed out that she and her co-founder gave each other 6 months. And I love that idea, because holding yourself accountable and actually having somebody else to hold you accountable can be a real urgency pusher, and it can propel you into action, whereas otherwise it can be, if there isn't a date, you can kind of, maybe I'll do it tomorrow and maybe I'll have a look and I'll have a Google about that. I love the fact that there was 6 months and off they went to decide whether they would go or not. The second thing is, I will take her term of resilience as distinct to the stubbornness, even though they're both sides of a very, very thin and similar coin. But the whole idea of resilience there is that looking at the RFP for the development, which would have been it must have been a really big capital expenditure. And instead, what they did was they took a step back and they just thought logically about how could they handle things. Remember what I mentioned earlier about, de-emotionalizing something, is that rather than thinking, oh, COVID has happened, why did this happen just at this time? And it's really going to affect us now. And putting it inward is instead, by the sound of it, what they did was they looked outward and they thought, what could we do about this? How could we change things? They mentioned the freelance coders, for example. And they thought about how they can pivot their idea, but still keep on going. And the third thing that I really like in there, and I'm a huge believer of it, is market research. I personally don't think that you stop market research after you create your product or your service. I think that it should be something that's ongoing all the time. And to give you a very distinct case in point in that, we use a database within our own business. We built it on Airtable based on one of their own templates, which is a UX user template, which is basically a way in which that you can cultivate market research all the time so that you can observe how the market is changing, the needs of your customers are changing, etc. In fact, the older I get, the longer I am in business, the more and more I see the impact and the importance of making sure that you're gathering market research all the time. So, on that note, what we're now going to do is we're going to go over and talk to another woman who's got another pivotal story to tell. Karina Turley from Capella. Can we please go to you, and will you tell us a little bit about you and your journey, please?
Thanks, Susan. I'm delighted to be here today to speak to you. My name is Karina Turley and I run a company called Capella Workplace Solutions. And we specialise in a very timely product, which is software for hybrid working. And we support companies in bringing staff both back into the office and in working from home. So we've been very, very lucky since we started the business to have some great clients working with us. And I suppose my entrepreneurial journey is a little bit different in that I was running businesses over the last kind of 20 years. And I was running quite a successful office design and employee engagement business right up until COVID. And I was over in the US with Enterprise Ireland, and we were trying to internationalize the business. And I was I found a company that we were interested in purchasing, and I had great plans for the future of the business. And I got a phone call from my husband saying they're closing the schools, and this COVID thing seems to be serious. And I kind of got stuck in Canada, and I realised that the budgets for beautiful office spaces weren't going to be there anymore. So what did I want to do, and what could I do? So I got back to Ireland. I let the dust settle for a few days, and I realised that there was a huge opportunity out there. There was going to be a thing called hybrid working coming in the future. And I think I got that quite quickly. I was very lucky in terms of that. And I realised that a lot of the clients that I had been working with, while there were no budgets there for beautiful offices anymore, there were issues that they needed help with. They needed help with productivity and safety of employees who were working from home, for understanding how space was going to be utilised and to manage everything around hybrid working. And I suppose I took a step back, and as Ruth mentioned and Susan mentioned, I did my research and I spoke to as many people as I could about what they needed help with. And I started Capella. And I really took kind of the experience that I had in the past, and I knew that I wanted to still work with beautiful design. So design is a huge part of all of our software. But I realized that the real solution that clients were now looking for was remote. And that was a big step for me because I had never worked in tech before, and suddenly I was talking about starting a tech company and running a tech company. So one of the first things I did was to find a really, really clever technology person, and I worked with him as quickly as I could. But I also knew that I wanted to internationalize the business. I had unfinished dreams from when I got stuck in Canada. So I started Capella with the idea that I could scale something internationally. And I started with a co-founder who was based in New York. I'd known her for a number of years, so I convinced her to join me on my dream. And from day one, we really wanted to be an international business. So we started with two pillars in hybrid working. The first was working from home, and we built a solution around making sure staff were set up right, working from home, using AI technology, using sentiment analysis, and using all of our experience of designing offices and how people work. And we developed a really, really nice tool to help employers make sure their staff were set up right and safe while working from home. And then we also looked at the other pillar, which is kind of a more recent development, I suppose. And we've launched another side to the platform, which is the return to the office. It was all very temporary a year and a half ago, but now it's becoming permanent, and people want that seamless solution as they return to the office. And we look after that as well. So we've been very, very lucky with some of the clients that we work with. They like our solutions because we really concentrated on where people needed our support. So that was in time saving, in taking the Excel spreadsheets out of the solutions of hybrid working, in giving back to operations managers, facilities managers, HR people, and just taking the pain away from that. And then productivity was a huge part of it. So we've worked with a lot of organizations around making sure that productivity is managed in hybrid working, and very much around employee engagement, which is kind of where our origins were. And the solutions are working really well. Where are we now? We have a full platform for hybrid working with lots of clients who are using it and giving us money for it, which is brilliant. We're in international markets. We're in Portugal, we're in Luxembourg, we're in the UK and America, and obviously Ireland. And we've developed a scalable product, and we kind of had that in our minds as we went along. We identified our target market really carefully and our value proposition, what made us different. I did New Frontiers, even though I had run businesses for a number of years. I went back to basics, and I found that absolutely brilliant. We carried out research with TU Dublin and Trinity's Learnovate and ourselves, just picking up the phone and talking to clients or potential clients. We have an office here in Ireland and in the US, and we're getting ready to take on investment. So that's kind of a very quick snapshot of Capella. And I suppose if I was talking about what I've learned on the journey, it kind of echoes something that Ruth mentioned there, which is you've got to keep going. I read an article about working in a startup recently, and the guy writing the article, and I wish I remember what his name was now, but he mentioned that having a startup is like being punched in the face every single day. And there are certainly days where it feels like that. But I always think of the Martin Luther King quote where he says, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, then crawl, but keep moving forward. And that's what you have to do in a startup. And that was the learning that I would take away. And if that's one message that I can deliver here today, it's that. So that's really it from me in terms of Capella and how I got here.
That is some story, Karina. That is some story to have gone all the way out to Canada and back again. You basically took us on a round the world trip there, not just geographically, but metaphorically as well. 3 things that stand out to me. The first one, Karina, is the title of the slide number 3, which is how do we support our clients? And I think that that's really important to ask, because as soon as you ask that question, then you know that the customer is going to be at the core. And it goes back to Ruth's point earlier about market research. But further than that, it was also what was at the top of slide 4, which is why do our customers like our product? And I think that that's very important, because we may think that we are selling X, whereas in essence, our customers want Y. We might think we're selling black pepper because it goes well with a carbonara, whereas in essence, somebody else wants to spice up their dinner. A slight distinction, but it's very important. So I really like the fact that you captured that along the way. The second thing that strikes me as well is the whole essence of COVID happened and yet you did not give up on your dream. I think that that's really important, and I think that that's something that's important for all of us to remember is just again like Ruth, you had to look at your business, you had to look at it differently, but you never gave up on that dream, or as you say, the unfinished business of internationalizing. And particularly the fact that you co-founded the business with somebody in New York accelerated the impact of that as well, and I'm sure brought a different perspective. And the third thing, Karina, that stands out to me is the fact that you said you went back to basics with New Frontiers. Despite the fact that you've been in business for a long time and you probably knew, on the face of it, everything that was going to be taught in it, the fact that you put yourself through that process and got that extra perspective, I think adds great tenacity and a sense of resilience as well to what you were doing, and also bringing in whatever new thinking might add to previous implementation. So that's really what stands out to me about the Capella story, and I'll be intrigued to see where it goes as you've taken all of that experience and dream and tenacity and everything else with the new embryonic trend in many ways. Speaking of trends, I spotted one, of course, in you, Ruth, as well. Well, it wasn't very difficult since you pointed it out to me, is small, big, small, big, small, big, small. So why the pattern? Why have you always gone that road?
Well, I suppose at the heart of it, I love startups. I love building and developing and bringing to market a proposition or a service or some sort of a solution that customers want and need. And the energy that comes with when you've got something and you've developed something that your customers want is just massive. It's magical. And it's for me, startups suit me a bit better. Startups, there's a high degree of uncertainty with startups. They certainly, may not suit everybody's type of personality, but the pace you can go at, and the wins, the feeling, the passion of the wins you get when somebody has, you've done a deal or you've won some new business and they really love your proposition is, can't be beaten. And no matter how hard you work, for me in a larger organisation, you're doing it for a company as opposed to doing it for yourself. Whereas when you do it for yourself, the personal motivation and the personal satisfaction is just, it can't be beaten. So I think that's why I keep going back to the startups. As I said, I've 4 behind me now. Fourth is definitely, my last number. They take such a huge amount of energy. There will be no more, but I'm definitely with VIGO Health for the foreseeable anyway.
Well, I'm laughing because I can imagine, and hopefully I will meet you in 5 years' time. I'm not sure number 4 is where it's going to end, but we'll see, and we'll leave the jury out on that. Karina, the wins, the passion, the dynamism, is that what attracts you to scaling businesses as well, or is it something different?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, Ruth, because absolutely. But I think it's just in you. And, the timing has to be right for sure. But if it's going to happen, you need to take that leap, but it will happen, because I think entrepreneurs just are born entrepreneurs, and you want the excitement, you want the highs, you'll take the lows because of the highs, and certainly I enjoy that.
And if I was to take that idea of, the highs and the lows, and you take that and it's born. I mean, you two are clearly such passionate and well-intended women to make sure that things happen. Also interesting as well, Karina, that you say, the time has to be right, even though you were at a stage where time was very wrong in a previous business and then you pivoted it. But all along the way, we have to talk about the hard fact that you do need resources behind it. So could you maybe just take us on the idea of the importance of having a scalable business and then putting money behind it? Ruth, in your case, you're saying you've been through institutional investment and other. Karina, in your case, you've mentioned that you're now looking at taking on investment. So can you just talk us through the importance of funding and scale?
Yeah, so I suppose from my perspective, you can have the best idea and the best product service proposition, but without, some kind of funding, you're not going to be able to get it to market. And, funding can, come from so many different ways. Typically it's either debt or equity. Debt is borrowing from friends, family, banks at the start, and equity is giving away a share of your company in return for some investment. So they're the typical routes. But I suppose, to get off the ground and to scale, and particularly, your question around how to scale and how to build and how to really grow a business that's scalable, you are going to need proper funding and capital to be able to fund that growth. And, the capital to fund it, your resources for people, your resources for development, or whatever it may be, can be quite significant. For me, I'm not a finance person, but I know my numbers inside out and backwards. And, if you are not an accountant or if you are not a finance person, you need to know your numbers. So you have to know how much of your kit do you need to sell to cover your costs, or how much of your kit do you need to sell to break even. And if you know your numbers better than anybody else, the conversations with investors and with funders go much smoother. They'll call out really, really quickly and very, very early if you don't know your numbers. And you don't have to be a finance person to know your numbers. You just need to know your business. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what's your own thoughts on that, Karina? Would you share that sentiment?
Absolutely, but I'd even take a little step back. I suppose we bootstrapped, which means we didn't take funding up to this point. And if you're thinking of starting a business, you really need to sit down and just go back to basics and say, okay, how am I going to pay the mortgage while I don't earn? Because I really thought that I'd be at a high level of earning within a month or two, and here I am 18 months later, and I won't even tell you where I'm at. You're putting all the investment into the business. You're hiring other people with the money that you used to spend on yourself. So what you want to do, if you are bootstrapping for a while, or if you're funding it yourself and building your minimum viable product and getting clients online, you just want to make sure that you're not going to choke as an individual or a family in the first few months, because that does happen to startups. So you want to be practical. You're there with your dream and you want to scale it, but really practical steps to start with. How am I going to do this? And then understand that there'll be a period where, unless you're taking investment immediately, which a lot of companies don't, because a lot of investors need to see that you've actually got a product that's selling, well then, you're going to have to tighten your belt. And I convinced other people to come and join me. They have families too. I convinced people to walk away from great salaries to join me on the journey and the dream. You want to make sure that actually I'm going to be able to pay them as well. And that's a big part of it. So just get really practical with money. Absolutely. What Ruth says about knowing your numbers, I couldn't agree more. Know them at every level. Know them in terms of the rent you're going to pay, the next computer you need to buy, and the bigger numbers and the bigger picture for investors.
Karina, can I just talk about, you talk about the practical aspects of paying for the mortgage and also, of course, the quasi-liability that ultimately staff are also. Do you think people confuse, do I need money for X and do I need money now? Do you think that short-term and long-term thinking can influence decisions that people make and take when it comes to money?
100% I do. I mean, if you're borrowing money or you're taking on investment, you want to know that you need it. You don't borrow money to leave it sitting in the bank. So if you're not ready, don't do it. Have your plan, do your cash flows, figure out what you're going to need. get yourself to the point where you're stretching to grow, and then make sure you have the money to grow. Like you said at the beginning, you know, what happens if your business doubles for a lot of people in COVID, their business doubled because suddenly they were in a zone of massive acceleration because of their product. And you want to have a plan for that. You want to be nearly grooming employees for the future, if that doesn't sound too creepy. But you also want to make sure that you have an understanding of how you're going to pay for all that. So you do your cash flows, you do your projections. And if you're not a finance person, find a friend who's a finance person, but find someone professionally as well, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, and you're both saying the same thing. I am a finance person myself. I love a good spreadsheet, I have to say, full disclosure here, but certainly not everybody is. And so far, what I'm gathering here from you both is, you know, your numbers and your finance and so on is knowing your business inside out. But I also, what I'm getting from you is the importance of dreaming. Is the importance of having, like sometimes we talk about vision as having, you know, a strategy and objectives, but do you think that having that sense or that willingness to dream is very important, Ruth? Because I'm getting that from you both.
Of course it is, and I think, you know, anybody who takes a risk or takes what is perceived as a risk in setting up their own business, they have to have a dream, because otherwise why are you doing it? You know, so having a dream and calling it a dream or a kind of a vision or whatever, that you have this kind of North Star guiding you, that you're kind of going towards. You know, in VIGO Health, our North Star is that we want to, you know, develop a new health and wellbeing proposition for a new generation. That is guiding us, and we will keep on going until we get there. How we get there, go back to something I said earlier on, of course we've got plans, and of course we've got a kind of a pathway, but we have to be able to, you know, kind of change that pathway, because things around us and the external environment will always change that. So, as you know, I think, yes, of course you need a dream, and of course you need a vision, but you need to be flexible in how you get there. So this is back to, you know, the journey to get you there might be totally different, but as long as you get there, you're okay.
But in fact, you've been prepared for that anyway, because like one of the key things that jumped out of your slides is assume that you'll be wrong a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
But that's okay. That's okay, because you know that as you go. Your own perspective on that, Karina, the importance of having a dream and having a North Star, because often we shy away from doing that in case it won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, innovation comes from dreaming, and dreams are never wrong. You know, innovation can come from anyone or anywhere. And you nearly need to allow yourself that time in the day, because I find when I'm really, really busy, you know, new ideas, new products, they just don't come. You need the time to step away. But certainly entrepreneurship and starting a business is all about dreaming and selling the dream, whether it's to customers, whether it's to colleagues, or whether it's to yourself on those days that are really hard. And it's a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. You often have to sell it back to yourself again, and that's for sure. The theme today, of course, is not just scaling, but getting past the first hurdle. So maybe could you share a couple of experiences with us of when you have had to get past hurdles? By the way, over and above what you've already shared with us, because both of you have faced a lot of them and told us that in your story. But, you know, what are hurdles? I described them earlier, that they can have to be learning experiences dressed up. But what's your perspective on this, Ruth? What would you like to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the business, and whether you're a startup or you're in a large company, like, hurdles will come at you, you know, and you just have to be able to respond quickly. You know, for me, another example of a hurdle was just pre-launch. 8 weeks before we launched, we realised that the platform that we'd spent 6 months working on and code was just not as good as it could have been, and we made a really, really hard decision to just throw out all our code and start again. Oh, wow. This was 8 weeks before we launched, and we were launching a platform, a digital product. Our solution is a completely digital product. That was a hurdle. That was a tough day in the office for me. But the decision to do it, and to have the kind of courage really to kind of make the tough decisions, and to kind of go, okay, have to just make that decision and move on and keep going with it, because, you know, you just have to. So I think for me, you know, hurdles will always be part of, you know, what a business is about, and it's how you respond to them, and it's how quickly you respond to them, and, you know, how much, you know, you allow these things to kind of, you know, punch you down or bring you down. For me, I try to, insofar as I can, and of course nobody's Superman, but insofar as I can, I try and take these hurdles and go, okay, I'm going to deal with them, I'm going to put them aside, I'm going to keep going. and what did I learn from that? Because otherwise they'll eat you up.
So understanding what they are, putting them to one side, and I'm going to move on. That's the three-step Ruth Bailey approach.
Yes.
Brilliant. And Karina, what about you? Again, like you've faced many of them too, and probably will continue to.
Oh, for sure. I think probably a very practical hurdle you face as a startup is that you're pitching against really established businesses, really big companies, and you're the small player, and you have to try and just be a little bit honest about that and explain that as a smaller business that you'll be far more flexible, and that the customer is a much bigger customer for you, and that you're going to support them in a way that the larger companies can't. If that's the way you want to go, I think it is going to come up. So what you need to do is have a bit of a strategy around explaining to customers why they should bank on a startup as opposed to a massive big UK or American company. And most people are very human about it, and they'll either be honest and say, look, we can't take a chance on you, you're a big organization, or they'll say, okay, let's give it a go, and I really expect a lot from you, and then you need to deliver.
Simple as that. And in many ways, Karina, it is that if you get people to back you, which is down to good communication and relationship building and so on, is that you have to be able to do what it says on the tin. No doubt about that. Another trend that I'm seeing completely, like it's coming up so often with you both, is the importance of the people that you have around you. I mean, not just the people that you sell to, but the people along the way. You talk about getting advice from finance people. You talk about having the relationships with your customers. You both, I believe, have co-founders from what you've said as well. So what do you feel is the importance of getting the right people around you? And, by the way, can you always do it?
I mean, look, for me in VIGO Health, my co-founder is invaluable. Would I be doing this journey without him? I might, but I wouldn't be enjoying it as much. And a co-founder adds a huge amount of value for lots of reasons. I mean, in my own kind of example, I'm the commercial person, and Stephen he's actually an actuary by trade, so now he loves a spreadsheet.
He does,
so we've very complementary skills, and we really kind of complement each other. But not only that, from a kind of an actual technical skills perspective, when we've got a business challenge in front of us, or when we've got decisions to be made, that's really, really fundamental for our business. You've got somebody to kind of, I suppose, bounce off. And I suppose I would take that a step further, and even though relationship with co-founder is very, very important, but I'd also, bring in the role of mentors. Mm-hmm. I have been exceptionally lucky throughout all of my career to have worked with some super, super mentors, and the value you can get from just chewing over a problem or with somebody, but a mentor in this example is just you can't put a price on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so having your co-founder, understanding the parameters of where you both work, the importance of mentors. Karina, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I would echo what Ruth said about mentors. It's really, really important, because there are people out there who have experience that you don't, and it's always worth having a conversation and finding someone who can fill in your gaps, I suppose. And then in terms of colleagues, the old saying about hiring people who are better than you, or cleverer than you, or smarter than you, I can't agree more. Will I be running this business in 5 years if it is turning hundreds of millions of euro, when it is turning hundreds of euros a million, or millions of euro? Probably not. There'll probably be someone out there better to run it at that scale. But I'm the custodian of it for the moment, and I'm always looking around me to see who can support me and can far exceed anything I can do. It's really, really important, I think.
And I think that having that sense of liberation can be huge, in just saying maybe there's somebody out there that's better than me, and being excited about that, indeed. Just as a final word, if I could ask both of you, let's say that there's somebody out there and they're listening and they have a business, or they think about having a business, the word scale scares them, and they would just like to hear maybe a voice from their own future, or maybe someone who would speak to how they're truly feeling that maybe they haven't even articulated themselves. What would you say, Ruth?
Well, you know, the first thing I say to everybody is do it, do it, do it. There'll never be a right time. Just do it. And, you know, even if it doesn't work out, and sometimes it won't, you will learn so much, not only about your business, but about yourself that you'll bring forward to your next experience. So there is never a right time. Just do it. The three things I always kind of say are the important kind of, you know, fundamentals for any business to either start or scale are, first thing is you need to have a product or a service. You need to have a product market fit or something that people will give value for. So you need to have a really good service. You need to have your funding, so we've spoken about that. You need to have your capital and your money in place. And the third thing I would say is that, you know, particularly the founder or the chief executive, like the chief executive or founder role of a startup is essentially a salesperson, you know, and it's quite a different type of role to a larger organisation, and you have to sell and you have to be able to go out and sell. And if I could say, you need a little bit of hustle, so you need to be able to just hustle a little bit sometimes to try and just, you know, get the business off the ground. And, you know, for me, I think the first 100 sales or the first 100 customers, they're nearly the hardest, and then once you can get out of the traps from your first 100, you know, things get a bit easier. But stick at it, and you know, there's never a right or a wrong time. Just do it.
Karina, last word to you on this.
Well, I would say that there are ways to scale, there are mechanisms to scale, and I agree with Ruth 100% on the first 100 clients and the need to be able to sell. But not every business has to scale to become a unicorn. First of all, there are plenty of lifestyle businesses out there. If that's what you want to do, then put that in your business plan. Sit down and say, what do I want this to be? Do I want to be a massive company, or am I happy to build a business that supports my lifestyle? So that's a very, very important question to ask yourself. And once you figure that out, I would say just understand that to scale a business takes time. Anytime you read an article in a newspaper that says someone has sold their business for 500 million, it isn't 2 years old. Regardless of how it reads in the newspaper, it's 10 years old, it's 15 years old. And I would say that was one of the biggest lessons that I had. I'm an instant gratification girl, and really I was shocked by the fact that it does take time. And if you do all the right things will happen, but in time. And that's what I'd leave you on.
That's great advice, really and truly, from you both. There's an awful lot of really great advice, and there's a lot of great mature wisdom in there as well. So on that note, I'm going to sincerely thank Ruth Bailey from VIGO Health, as well as Karina Turley from Capella, and I'm going to finish with the final piece of advice on this, and that is make sure and enjoy it along the way. Thank you indeed to everybody who has been tuning in, and we hope that today has given you the inspiration and the actual hard facts as well that's involved in getting up and getting going, but most importantly, scaling up and getting past that first hurdle. Every best wish to you all.